Good day, everyone. Welcome to Getting Your Edge How to Size Your Home and Life podcast. I'm Dennis Day, and I'm here with my co-host and newly published author, Judy Gratton. Good morning, Judy.
Morning, Dennis.
I'm doing great. You have some exciting news.
I do.
We're going to share a little something about this. Here, just let me share. There we go.
I wrote a children's book, and it took me 5 years to get it done. I wrote it for a couple of reasons. My granddaughter, now I have two, so the other ended up in the book as someone else. In Bothell, where I live, there are crows that come every night. Thousands of, if you look them up, the crows of Bothell, you'll see lots of YouTube videos on them. I decided they needed a matriarch. Clarice Crone, pun on crone, old lady, is the matriarch of the Bothell Crow clan. They don't like being called a murder, so it's a Crow clan. I'm very excited because I'm thrilled at how many people have actually bought the book, and I get to go to the Crow Festival today and read the book. This is my new book. You'll find it on Amazon. Thanks.
Congratulations. Today, we're really excited because we have a special guest. Her name is Elizabeth Clark Stearns. She's a counselor, therapist, and author from the North Seattle area. She's here to discuss a part of downsizing, which is really difficult to comprehend for this podcast is not just for those who are thinking about downsizing, have family who are downsizing, and how difficult it can be from that family home that you've been in for years. So let's get started. Elizabeth Clark Stearns, please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Hello, I am attempting to retire as a psychotherapist. I've been in private practice for 25 years. And prior to that, I did social work with children and families through the foster care system, which is you really learn a lot about how important place being with is when you have to remove a child from a home. And if a child has been the parenting child to the parent, and the parent is drug addicted or mentally ill, and then the child is taken out, they need a transition object. So we say, get him a kitten, get a dog, get him something to love. If any of what I say today makes any sense to you, the big banner in it is love transition, because that's what happens when you're moving from one space to another space. When someone dies, it's really the same process. And the transition to a new way of life takes us all through the same corridors. In my private practice, I work with individuals, couples, families, children. I'm getting a kitten today. So I recently took all of the little figures in my sand tray box, which I used to use for children to act out the story of their lives, and I put it on the floor to use as a cat. I'm looking forward to my aging process. I'm almost 76. I'll be 76 on Thanksgiving. I'm healthy so far, but have recently lost a dear brother. I understand how fragile and precious life is. I've written a book called The Language of Water, which is feminist science fiction published by Aqueduct Press on Amazon. It's about the future and how we don't have enough water, but the power of women and the power of love transcends that. Reading. I am so thrilled that you are here today. I've been talking to Dennis about the need to bring someone on to talk about the emotional aspects of downsizing and making that move for a long time. I'm really grateful that you're here today. Thank you so much. You're very welcome.
Elizabeth, how does downsizing trigger feelings of loss and grief, especially when people have lived in a single home, raised a family, and spent decades there?
One of the basic cornerstones of human behavior and our orientation to the world is attachment. There are tons of books written about attachment theory. That applies not only to holding your baby, and the baby is born and becomes attached to you, also to everything in your surroundings, to physically being able to walk through that same door and seeing your children and grandchildren. I'm remembering in the other room, right outside the kitchen of our house, in pencil on the door, is all of the stages of growth of our granddaughter, going from the time she could barely toddle through the door. And now she's 5'8", towers above us all. She says, I'm the tallest woman in the family, Nana. And so she is. When I think of leaving this home, the first thing I want to do is grab a hammer and take it off the door and take it with me because it's so sacred and precious. There are little corners of every place in a home that represent life lived and hopefully life lived joyously. The idea of pulling up stakes, donating, giving away possessions and cornerstones of your life is a deep loss. People experience it the same way they experience a death of a loved one. Some people are more sensitive than others. Some are more pragmatic. The ones who really are in touch with their feelings get it. They know how profound this is. So that's what I would say, first of all, is that pulling up stakes like that is a deeply emotional experience for almost everyone.
I can speak from experience of having worked with multiple people who've gone through this. The most difficult thing about working with them, helping them through that transition, in some cases, incredibly stressful. Had one client tell me, she said, I am part of the dirt.
Oh, beautiful.
It is beautiful, except that it's very difficult.
You can't take the dirt with you.
They built that home back in the 70s, and they've been there ever since. The transition is just very difficult. What are some of the common emotional hurdles people should be prepared to face?
I think one of the main ones is resistance. That comes up again and again. Do I really need to do this? We've got a 3-story house and now I'm in a wheelchair. Do I really need to do this? We can put it in an elevator. If you're familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, the first one is denial, resistance, and very often if it's an aging couple, one of them is in one place, the other one's in another. Somehow they have convinced themselves to get to your office to talk about selling their home. They can expect a lot of tension around that, a lot of magical thinking. Things like, we'll put in an elevator or a fire escape and that has a ramp on it, all kinds of crazy things people think of in a desperate effort not to leave their home. So resistance, denial, and then maybe anger is another big one. Why do I have to do this? So-and-so down the road, they don't have to do it, and they're the same age I am. Their kids have come in, and now they live with their kids. The kids have come back home because they don't want to sell the house. You can rationalize it almost any way. Anger, I always say anger and grief.
Who are they directing this anger at?
Often at each other, unfortunately. Or it may be at you. You may get some of this, oh, why do I really need to do this? Have you experienced that?
Yes, I have. People be angry with me, and it's not anything I can control.
No, it's nothing to do with you. And so that's what I mean about the irrationality of the anger. It can be addressed at their kids, maybe, for not stepping up and buying the home so that they could always go back to it. Look at the housing prices in Seattle, for example. My kids couldn't afford to buy my house.
Right.
It's just not rational. We'll do anything not to have to give up that door jamb that has all the stages. Grand, final house for us. You guys can move in here and then we'll come visit you from wherever we live in our small condo. Anger and grief are two sides of the same. They're so close. The anger often defends against this deep grief to have to leave the home, to have to leave the memories. But it's something that must be faced. And often, especially men, sometimes it's like a matter of pride. I don't feel grief about leaving the home. It's very practical. And they'll say to their wife, we have to do this. But they're just afraid of their own grief. They don't want to have to say, this breaks my heart. So you have to be able to face the fact that it breaks your heart. And that's a very hard thing for many people to do.
Dennis, your father, how did he react when they left their home? Did you see any of that in him?
My dad didn't like feelings as much, and I would have preferred he was the doer, the goer, and we're just going to plow through this as the practical, that sort of
Sounds like what you
mentality.
was. Yeah.
So my mom was a little more attached, particularly when they had lived 10 years at a really small, tight-knit community and done the potlucks there and all this, that she was going to really miss out on this social life when they moved. But my dad was more like, this has to be done. Let's get busy.
Well, that's another very important point, Dennis, is community. Often it's not just the house, especially if the kids grew up there and you all went to school functions together and got to know the neighbors. Everybody got together, raised their kids together, were in and out of each other's houses. It's the neighborhood that is such a loss. Oh my goodness, that's another very big one.
Where's the local pharmacy, the grocery store, the shortcuts, how to take if you're driving, those sorts of things. All of those come into play. It's funny though, because when I left the first house we owned, we were in for about 5 years. We moved in when my daughter was 2. She's now 30. We were only in it for 4 or 5 years, but when I left, I cried. We were still leaving behind, and I was much younger than I am now. It's definitely more difficult as you get older, but it happens for a lot of people who have a home and a community that they enjoyed, even if it's a good thing, like moving into a bigger house, a better school district. Still, there's a loss leaving
Oh,
behind.
absolutely. Bringing up the idea of any age in terms of this transition. If you're an older couple and moving because it's too hard to manage in the house you live in, maybe you've taken a couple of falls. The real reason for moving is safety. Downsizing brings you close not only to the loss of the home, but your own mortality. That may be the elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about. If we're 80 something and move into an apartment, independent living, I have a girlfriend whom I've known for 65 years. We grew up as little kids on the same block and live in very different cities now. She lives in Austin and I live here. She recently gave up her home of 35 years where she'd raised her daughter to move into a studio apartment. She couldn't afford more than a studio. The cost of independent living places is outrageous. She had to get rid of almost everything. The professor, she had books, a whole room of books. Those all had to go, except for a little bookshelf. And where she lives now, she's in shock. And yet she can't drive anymore. She's losing her memory. Her kids were frantic about it. It's absolutely what had to be done, but it was a big transition.
So if someone is feeling these depression, anxiety, anger, grief, what are some techniques or methods to help people overcome these and get the job done or move on and so forth?
I think it's the same as with any kind of grief counseling. Talking about it helps enormously. Talking with your pastor, a therapist, or close friends who really understand, who can just listen without trying to problem solve, without trying to say, oh, maybe you can stay there just 2 or 3 more years. You need to find a listener who really gets the depth of the pain and doesn't try to smooth it over the stage you're in. If there's a couple involved in conflict, couples therapy or marital counseling can be essential. So you can talk it through together. Very often people say things in couples they've never said before at home. The shock to both of them. I didn't know you felt that way. Or what? You're really angry with me about that? That comes up a lot. And to acknowledge that this kind of transition requires that kind of sometimes professional help fully as much as, say, the death of your parents or the death of a child or something that we think of as, oh, of course, you'd go into a support group. I don't know that there exists support groups for people going into downsizing housing.
Be an excellent thing to have, wouldn't that, Dennis? But
Yes, we should.
when you talk about the listeners, Dennis can attest to this. We spend a lot of time doing that.
Oh, people are like therapists.
From the standpoint of being similar in age, I can relate. I tell them I'm going through the same thing because we have a 2-story house on a lot that's too big, and I don't want to do all the things required. One of the things that is difficult is that you watch homes where people cannot take care of them but refuse to leave, and
Oh.
the homes begin to deteriorate. Then when they don't have a choice anymore or they're gone, you're left with something that is not as much value as it could have been had it been maintained. The paint's peeling off the house. The yard is so overgrown you can't see the front door. It just goes on. And it's really not their fault, other than the fact that they could have maybe moved earlier and avoided that.
That's another very critical point because the house has a life of its own. The home you've lived in for so long is a living organism. The paint on the walls, the roofs you put in 5 years ago, doors, all the stages of growth of your grandchild. Don't you want to maintain it and care for it so it passed on to another generation?
And a lot of times when the decision is finally made to make the move, they've seen what their neighbors' homes have sold for. They have this expectation that their home is going to be the same. The problem is that they need a new roof. The furnace is 25 years old and the electrical box not up to code anymore. Every one of those subtracts value from what the home could sell for. And it's hard for people to wrap their heads around because that money is what they're going to live on most likely.
It's our American way, at least since post-World War II, is that you buy the home, live in it, sell, take the equity, and then that's what you live on in retirement. This has been effective for many people because home values have skyrocketed, allowing them to leave with a significant amount of money to be in a retirement community or move to a smaller place. And without that equity, they're really limited on what they can do. And in my case, my mother's 93. She's run out of that money. It can only last so long. And now we're trying to get her on Medicaid so that she continues to be able to stay in the same place. But if you let your home go, you're reducing the amount of money you have in that end of life cycle.
This brings up the practical aspect of all of this because there's the emotional and the attachment, and then there's the pragmatics of it. Years ago, when I was trying to make a difficult decision, someone said, just take a legal pad and draw a line down the middle and put pro and con. In this case, you might put practical on one side and attachment or emotional or love on the other so that you can list all these things you're talking about.
Yeah, that was my next question is how do you help people differentiate between their emotional attachments to things and what's practical, what has to be done no matter what? You can't keep all those books that you can hold.
Exactly what you just said. On the reality side would be, for example, in my friend's case, she's too distracted to drive. It's dangerous to drive. She keeps falling. Her short-term memory is horrible. She forgets things. When I visit her, I end up saying, when you put that in the freezer and it really belongs in the stove, you just can't manage the day-to-day. Those would actually be on the practical side. On the let's face reality side and the cost. She lives in Austin, so she just sold this huge home for $400,000. That home in almost any neighborhood in Seattle would go for over $1 million. You have across the country different realities of pricing. How long is that money going to last? Then you have all those books, cherished memories, the canopy bed still in the little child's room, even though her daughter's in her 30s. You have all the attachment things. And to be able not to demonize your feelings, I think that's so important to be able to say, it matters. It matters to me, and it's about love. It's about the great love that I had for my daughter, that I still have the canopy bed in there because I love going in there. Just look at it and to remember it. And at the same time, it's a both and, which I think is actually really a marker of aging, is to be able to face the paradox. Almost everything as we get older, it's not either or. It's not I'll stay in my home until I drop dead, or I just leave everything and grieve for the rest of my life. Neither one of those are good alternatives. The alternative is to face both and say, yes, it's going to hurt, heck, but I'm going to leave it. Well, one idea I had was to take pictures of things in the house. You could even make an album. All of our pictures are on our tiny little phones. Even if they're saved on the iCloud, it's still not saved. Of having an actual photograph album that would have a picture of the canopy bed. This is where she grew up. This is what I love about this house.
I have suggested getting index cards, putting the photo on the card,
Oh,
writing your story, why it's important to you, like taking a picture of that piece of the door jamb and then writing your story on the back. Although your family members don't want the things, they would appreciate what your thoughts were about that canopy bed, whether you put it in a Dropbox file or in an index box. In the box, you can pick it up, look at it, and read your story and remember the importance of it, which I've suggested to clients. I've even given clients boxes. It's easier said than done. So but I think it's good. I've been doing that with things that I've given away. I've taken photos of them.
Are you sure you don't want to become a therapist?
I think we might be a little bit.
I once had a client who was a hairstylist,
Oh.
and she would talk about when people in chair, they would tell her their whole life stories. I have a friend who was a psychologist for a while, and he said better help people by selling them houses. He was an estate agent and loved his work because they're so similar.
It's every day in real estate's a new day. You don't know what you're going to be coming up against.
Yes.
The emotions that get involved. Commercial real estate is a different beast. I don't do it. It's all analytical, and at least that's been my experience.
Sure.
But residential is very emotional.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. They talk about how a teddy bear for a child is a transitional object, right? A child, say, in a divorced home, goes back and forth. My daughter had a Big Bird doll. She went on and the neck got so thin, but she would take Big Bird with her back and forth. This is the same concept. If you had a big yard, beautiful plants, even if you move into a condominium, a deck, you can have a windowsill where you plant something that reminds you of home. Bring the rose with you. It's miniature roses that you get at the QFC, but they're the same color. But when you water them and smell them, you can go, I'm still home. On a profound level, one of the things that this can inspire in people going through this kind of a loss, it's the same as going through any death. It brings you to the dark night of the soul in yourself. If you use it in the right way, you can journal about it, write stories about it, write your feelings, do art about it. It can bring you to a place where you realize that home is deep inside of you, and that in a way, everything in the environment around you was a projection of that love, that attention. Even in death, you take it with you. That home is a part of you, so that the transition into a smaller space is not really that significant if you can get to the place where you say, okay, it's there within me and will always be within me. And whether you want to call it divine love, or Carl Jung would call it the self with a capital S, it's who you are deep inside. Helping to transition like this and to let go. Anytime you let go of things in your external life, whether it's a loved one who died or a beautiful home that you tended and cared for all those years, the act of letting go brings you to what you will never let go of. It's your own deep self.
I like that idea.
How can downsizing impact a person's identity, especially if they associate the home to family, stability, history, and a sense of self?
That's a great question and a good follow through to what I just said, because that's about the death of the ego. We all have one and we all need one to survive in the world, to thrive, to say, here I am, I'm Elizabeth Clark Stearns, and I've done all this stuff, I've made all this money, and I've published this book. But in the end, it's a part of saying, what is my identity? Who am I, really? Am I the person who has created all these things and done all these things? Yes, that's good. That's good, and I can be proud of that. Can I move to a new place in my life where I can let go of the need to identify with who I am, what I look like, what I've done, and instead identify with the great deep love that I have inside myself, the capacity I have to connect, to attach, to give, to be with. And this is a very difficult transition. One of the books that I think would be marvelous for people to read, called Falling Upward by Richard Rohr. And it's about finding a new dimension to yourself in the second stage of life.
I like
And he's on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and just search Richard Rohr, he's all over the place.
Aurora.
Rohr,
Okay.
Richard. He's a Franciscan friar, but he's the most unorthodox ever run into. He talks about sex and all dimensions of life, the grittiness of life, with great humor. And he looks like Santa Claus. Falling upward is about when you begin to fall from identity you have forged all your life. The success, living in the fancy neighborhood, the nice car, all of these monikers of identity that late in life just don't hold. It doesn't hold psychologically because either you have to move or you just begin to intuitively look around you and say, is this really me? Do I need all this? It doesn't mean that making money is bad. It doesn't mean that living in a beautiful home or a rich home is bad at all. You take all that with you, but you begin to transition into a place where identity is based on connection, relationship, the moment of your life now, precisely because you don't have that many years left. If you're looking at 76, maybe I have another decade, who knows, another year, who knows. But it brings into focus the very preciousness of your experience of life and your own journey away from an identity that's based on anything exterior.
That's very, I had never thought of that before like that.
But I got to tell you, and it's also so freeing.
But I don't think people, it's been my experience that if I don't have this thing, this cup, this whatever it is, I'm going to be lost. Most people don't spend their lifetime looking inside. They're looking outside. That transition from one to the other, if you haven't done it, it's got to be difficult.
It's very difficult. But it's like people who have nightmares, for example. I do a lot of work with dreams because dreams are an incredible landscape for understanding where you are in life. And sometimes the most horrible nightmares are about psyche, your spirit, your dream maker, shaking you and saying, wake up. If there's a wolf coming in the door, what is it in your life you need to turn and face and confront? And in my experience, people dream about houses a lot.
They do. I always tack that one up because that's what I do for
Dreams exist on so many levels, but I dream of my grandmother's house. In dreams, the house symbolizes yourself. That is you, your house. So if you dream of your grandmother's house, I think that's where my sense of myself was born when I was a little girl. Somehow I attach it to grandma's house, even more than the house I grew up in with my family, just because she was so loving, was so different, and it was so strange and wonderful. But dreaming about houses, especially if you have to leave one, can be another way that you can say, wow, what love lived here? How do I take this love that was in every corner of this house and put it inside of me so that I take it not only to the new house, the downsized house, but take it out in the world, take it to my children, my grandchildren, the plants that I plant and put on the windowsill. Those are the questions I think that could be transformative for people.
Now, speaking of children, one of the major conflicts that we run into when people are downsizing is many of their children, either they want to be totally involved and tell their parents how they're going to do things, or they don't want to be involved at all, or they're frustrated with their parents because they won't let things go. And it causes tension and oftentimes conflict.
Yeah.
What would you say to the children? What would you say to the brother or the sister or anyone who's trying to assist someone in this transition? Because they don't think about it.
That's a tough one. That is very tough. And I'm just dealing with this the other day with someone. I think part of it is to start with the parents, actually, because often all this tension gets escalated because the parents give the kids too much power over their emotional lives. And if one child says, Mom, you've got to move right away, and I've got to take over your finances, and the other one says, I don't want anything to do with it, I think you should just stay where you are, blah, 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 and they're fighting. it's back to your identity question, Dennis. It's as an aging person, do you own your own value and say, okay, this is very hard for me, attached to the house. I don't think you need to take over the finances. If I need somebody to help me with finances, I'll call Charles Schwab. Thank you very much. It's the parent being able to not be railroaded by their kids and to not put up with that kind of conflict. And if the kids are going to be in conflict, you'd say to the kids, go away. You guys figure this out. And I see that more often than you'd think, that there's a,
Oh no, you see it all the time. I had a very dear friend, and she had been raised during World War II. She was a hoarder, and my first experience with her is she had asked me to help her clean out a room. The end of cleaning out the room, she was so mad at me because I would pick up like a piece of ribbon this big and go to throw it away, and she would say, I can use that. When I left, I'm like, I will never do that again. I have no idea. I know when she passed, her kids just went in and threw everything into dumpsters.
Storm.
Rightfully so.
Oh, how bad.
House was bad. That they had a lot of anger at her because they wanted to come in and clean it up, and she did not want them to come in and clean it up. I don't know what she thought would happen if I came in and helped her with one room, but it was, the tension around that is terrible.
And hoarding is a mental illness. I mean,
Yes.
it's something that, as you say, goes back to the anxiety and the loss in World War II. So I need to hold on to everything. And when I worked in the foster care system, kids would put old pizza crust under their bed. They would hoard food in fear of starvation if they had been locked in a room or something. So there's no way that children or, God forbid, a real estate agent can intervene with that kind of incredible anxiety and acting out of anxiety. And if you're talking just to the children, because that was your question, again, I would stress that you need to say to them, in the end, this is your folks' decision. And I understand your anxiety, but your conflict is making it worse. You two have got to either work together or just let one of them take over and the other one go to Madagascar or get out of the picture.
And I think that I would love to make them aware, because they're in a period of their life where they're not doing this. And they don't see how this change, like you said, it's about mortality too. You're getting to a place where the things to look forward to are a little bit spooky. They're not, I'm going off to college, I'm getting my first house, I'm getting married, I'm having children. And then suddenly it's, oh, now what? And they don't see that. And I think I would love to, if anyone is listening to this because of their family downsizing, please take it into consideration that it's really important to be supportive. And I had someone tell me a long time ago that if they're picking up the cup, they'll start telling you the story around the cup, let them tell you the story.
Oh, yes.
And it's easier for them to pack it or give it away. So rather than rushing them and getting it all out of the house and being done, in this particular transition, it's much more important to, I think, give the people the grace to work through those items,
Have those.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's back to the attachment. How significant and how strong that attachment is to the cup. Yes. To whatever it is.
Tools.
Oh.
I've done this a lot.
It's Dan's hammer and I'm not giving up Dan's hammer.
Not giving it up. Yeah. It is just that simple.
It's that simple and it's that deep and it's that complex and it's that hard. But
See, the kids are coming from a different place. They don't know what this feeling is because they've never experienced that feeling of their 80-year-old mother, and they have their own agenda. I've got to get her into a safe place. I got to get her into a place she can afford.
And I'm busy.
This house is crumbling. And I'm busy, and I got to get this done fast. And I was guilty of that. I just did not understand the feelings of attachment my mom had to certain things. It's like, where's this coming from? Now I know. And if you're 40 and you have a busy life with kids and etc., you can't understand somebody who is feeling the grief and loss of that move because you haven't experienced it.
Absolutely. And there's no real way to open their eyes to that either. I think that's why I think it's important for the parents at some point to just set limits on it and say, look, you guys don't understand this, and I'm not going to explain it to you one more time. We just
That takes communication. And I think when you hit that conflict and the anger, the communication goes out the window. Now we're
absolutely.
yelling at each other.
What?
And sometimes it takes a lot of strength on the part of the parent to stand up and say that from people who didn't have that strength to begin with. It's difficult. It's really, this is such an emotional issue. That's why I said I'm so grateful that you're here. Dennis
Well,
is a story. I don't know if he ever told you, it's one of my favorites about his mom's pie plate.
what-
Can you go
Yeah.
over that again?
Sure, we're moving her from independent living to assisted living. You can't have a stove in assisted living. You can have a microwave, but you can't have a stove or oven for safety. Apparently, it's a rule. And she was holding on to these pans. They were dollar pie pans, glass that you could get at Fred Meyer. And said it was so hard. Didn't understand. I do now. I probably get it. Yeah, this was not just giving them a couple of glass pie pans. It was giving up the lemon meringue pie she made for my father at his birthday, or the pie, the strawberry rhubarb pie that came after picking strawberries out in the field, or the Christmas pumpkin pie. She was giving all that up, and she hadn't done any pie for years and years and years. But it did matter. It was tough, and it was hard to understand because I was not in her place.
And that I
Oh,
think
right.
that is a perfect example of what we're talking about here.
Did you let her take the pans with her?
I such humans.
You're not this.
She did give them up, and yeah, it was. I made things like, okay, mom, you can come over to my house and make pie or something. But no, I'm sorry. I don't know if I was just mean or obstinate, but you can't take them. You can't. You don't have room. She's going from 600 square feet, 2-bedroom place to under 300. And she won't be able to use them. So I feel bad about that too.
I'm impressed with how much you've grown, and that you now say, now I get it. Now I am. And here's an example. I was talking about my friend who recently moved, who had the daughter with the canopy band. She took a baby dish that was what her daughter ate out of, and she brought it to the new place, but she put dirt in it and planted nasturtiums and put it in the windowsill. If there's a way that the pie pans, for example, could have been repurposed, you have dirt from the old house put into, you sprinkle it with little seeds or something. That's a way that can have a magical, almost alchemical transitional aspect to what you're doing.
Is there a way to help adult children who have an agenda, who are busy, who don't have the emotional feelings, to help them understand what their parent is going through?
I would recommend family counseling. I would say, look, you guys don't get it, and I'm a real estate agent, and you need professional. Adopt.
I'm sure I'd say that, but
That's clocking that job. If we tell them they
to find somebody else.
Well, seriously, because you can try to give them the pie pan story. I think that's a great example of trying to help them understand how profound this is for their parents, and how their resistance and their practicality. Show them the two columns. Okay, here's all the practical stuff, and here's what mom is going through. She's going through grief and loss and anger and bargaining and all of the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. That's where mom is. You can really help by explaining what we're talking about today. And if they still get resistant, it's maybe your pastor or a family counselor, someone who can help you really see it from your parents' point of view, and how understanding that will make it easier for everybody, because nobody needs all this conflict.
Yeah.
the
No.
kids begin to look at the parents as fragile, as children, and that they have to take care of. And
Yeah.
at one point, my daughter started referring to my husband and I as her little parents. I can show you how little I am here, and don't do that. And I see that a lot. I mean, parents and children, especially as parents get older.
Well, and they're not wrong. That's the kids are not wrong to look at the parents and we are getting more fragile as we get older. And we do have falls and we do have lapses of memory and we do screw up on the technology because we've never understood it in the first place. But I think, again, just encouraging empathy. And I don't know that it would help to say, you're going to be there one day, God willing. You'll live to be 80 and you'll experience what this is like. That probably wouldn't help. But
No, because they won't get in till they're
and what you guys have to deal with is the reality of how hard all this is. And it all falls to you to try to enlighten people.
We've talked a lot about this in previous shows, that planning ahead, having if you're a senior, talking with your family about what you want before it has to happen. In my case, and in so many cases, all this happens at a crisis point when mom falls and has to move, or the house is so bad they can't get around. And instead of reacting, that you have a plan, and then the person who has to move has some sense of control. Tough to do because I don't know, maybe it's America, maybe it's just human nature. We don't plan ahead as much. We're not proactive, we're reactive.
I think that's very critical, very important point. My husband's brother, who's only 3 years older than him, died a few months ago, just suddenly, just had a heart attack and went. And my kids were so jolted by it, they both texted and said, you guys have to give us we have a big folder of all of the legal stuff. We've done all that. They said, oh, you got to tell us exactly where you want the ashes. Do you want us to compost you, or do you want us real specific? Because it frightened them, the fact that he could go so quickly. One of us could go so quickly. So we did. We said, look, we want a park bench and above the bluff at Richmond Beach, and at night, secretly mix our ashes together and put them in the bushes there.
Good for them, though. That's really a healthy way to live your life.
Yeah. To look ahead. Absolutely.
Are there any therapeutic approaches and techniques that you can help clients process their feelings of loss while preparing them emotionally for a new home?
Oh, boy. Oh, it's so wonderful that you ended that sentence with new home, because I think part of it is understanding that this new home is something you can imbue with new vision, new dreams, color. The more detail that they take in, okay, that was that way in the old house. I didn't really like the way the window shades were in the back bedroom. So the details of how I will make this so special for myself and my husband, say it's the couple, really almost like you're decorating a doll's house and child, opening up your imagination, seeing the positive aspects of the fact that you won't have to climb the stairs to do the laundry or whatever it is, emphasizing those kinds of positive aspects. And at the same time, talking about writing a journal, maybe what you're talking about with the stories, writing stories, taking pictures, thinking about what do I want to remember about the house and how can I preserve that in a way that is small and fits in the new house and is all about the Richard Rohr book that I was talking about. The most wonderful thing about it is that he says in the second half of life, you really are free of the things you talked about, Dennis, about when you're in your 40s and you're working 2 jobs and you're raising kids. And often women are working 2 jobs and raising kids. Gone are the days of the 1950s. This life is so stressful now. But what if you can let that go, and even let go the idea of having to maintain the lawn where your beautiful house was? Focus on the fact that this is going to be a transition into a free and enjoyable time of my life. And how do I consciously invite that and create that? And take that art class that I never had the time to take. And if you miss your neighborhood friends, invite them to join a yoga class with you. So you see them once a week. But just be very intentional about how you can bring value and love and joy into your life.
Have you ever dealt with clients that had resisted or felt the loss and grief of downsizing, and then suddenly found out that the next place was really positive.
Yes. Yes, actually. Yeah, even my friend that I talked about who downsized from her big house and is in shock, the upside of it is I hear her saying, "Oh, but then I went to this event that they had, and now they have exercise classes every morning, and I don't have to cook ever because they have meals." In spite of the fact that she's still going through the transition, I finally said to her, "You seem more alive to me than I have seen you in a long time. When you were back in your house, your big house, alone with your dog, miserable and not having the energy to get out and go to the senior center. Now you live in a senior. You gotta avoid it. You have all this wonderful opportunity for interaction." So yes, that's one example. And she's a friend, not a client. But I've seen it especially with the death of a spouse. If a spouse dies and then, say, the wife is now got to downsize, needs the resources financially, there's also a joy in that, a joy in joining with a community. I knew someone who moved to a place called Sungaya. We called it
Sangaya.
you know Sungaya.
Friend who lives in Sangaya.
Oh, talk about it. Tons of people about it.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
great place. If you can get, it's very they have very limited housing there, so it's hard to get in.
it is. But the person I know who moved into Sungaya is what do they call it? A not intentional community. There's a word, whole housing. Is that
It
it?
is. Yeah, but I believe it is an intentional community too.
Yeah.
I've watched that place develop for decades now. They do. It's a very interesting place. Thoughtful.
And the person I know, again, is in a studio apartment. Her bed is in her living room. She has a little kitchen.
I might know the same person.
That's very possible. But in Sungaya, they have a fabulous garden. They grow a lot of their own food. They have
A
a
peach oven.
oh, yes.
Yeah, they've got a kiln for, yeah, they've got all kinds of things.
And they have, as I understand it, they host local political client pamphlets and have all kinds of fundraisers and join and bring the community in. And again, that person is not lonely anymore, ever. So yes, Dennis, I'm seeing many positive outcomes.
So, is living as a widow or even as a couple, not speaking to each other because you've said everything, is loneliness a real severe problem right now?
Oh, it's an epidemic. I think it's absolutely an epidemic. And I think there are all these articles and in the New York Times and all these other places and statistics, and it's a terrible problem.
COVID did not help that.
Oh, the pandemic. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that made it all much more obvious and much worse.
And technology has not helped at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even though I think one of the good things about the pandemic was Zoom. Meanwhile, then I do a group. Another thing I would highly recommend. I facilitate a group at St. Mark's, which is an Episcopal cathedral downtown on Capitol Hill in Seattle. And we have a group called the Third Actors, meaning we're in the third act of our lives. And we have in-person potlucks, but we also meet on Zoom every month. And I think there's 60-something members on the Zoom call. And third act, we all talk about aging. And it's a support group. It's ways for people to bring up all their fears and anxieties. All of them are talking about this. And the widows especially, or the widowers. There's some men who are just extraordinarily lonely. But they meet at the potlucks. They talk. I'm hoping secretly that there'll be some romances that bloom out of this. But
Is this the new group?
People, or do they have to be members of St. Mark's?
I don't think they have to be members. And I know one person who's a member of a different church.
How would they
Mm.
find information on this?
Just go on the St. Mark's website, or they could email me at ecstern@yahoo.com because I'm a facilitator.
Okay.
And I'll put them on the email list and invite them in. But I would hope there are groups like this in community centers, in local churches. I haven't done an extensive search of it, but community, I think, is so much about what's important. And giving back in the way that you can. One of the things I recently did that I stumbled onto that I thought I would never do something like this. But in retirement, having only a few clients left, I joined a group through St. Mark's, although it's not directly attached to St. Mark's, called Operation Night Watch. And a priest and a strapping young man and I, the three of us, go out in the evenings up and down the street on Broadway, and we have bags of water and socks and snacks. And we talk to the homeless, the people who have chosen to live their lives on the street. Most of them are drug addicted or mentally ill or both. And I was so nervous. I thought, oh, this is not something I should be doing. And my kids would be freaked out if they knew it. And I said, but I got to tell you, the first gentleman I walked up to was sitting on a bench. He was twitching. And he looked in my eyes. He said, oh, who are you? You're new out here. And I said, hi, my name's Elizabeth. What's your name? And we shook hands. And it was so moving. And I may never see him again, but I gave him water and socks and treats. And he was so grateful. And any way you can connect to the world, or a lot of people like to work with children. They go to children's hospital, hold babies. These are all things that counteract loneliness. You meet other people. I've met a lot of marvelous people who go out on the streets with me, and we all really love it. And it's strange to really love doing something like that. But there are many opportunities there.
It's connection. It's communication. It's all of those things that are working right now.
So what's in your future, Elizabeth? Your book author? Are there more books or
Oh, yeah.
retirement to
Bothell.
Cabo or something like that? Or
I'm in what I call divine flow, if you will. I have been blessed with my life as a Jungian therapist, most recently from the work I've done at St. Mark's. I just feel a presence of divine love, and I feel it flowing through me and through all the people around me, whether it's the schizophrenic on the streets or singing in the choir. I'm singing in the choir. And I just want to follow that flow and trust that it will lead me to give and to receive and to be a part of life. And yes, I've got another book that I've finished, and I don't know if the publisher's going to like it or not. It's about artificial intelligence and humanity, but we'll see. And I wrote another play, and a group of us, we call ourselves the Shrink Raptors because we're all therapists who had a life in the arts before we became therapists. So we really enjoy doing plays together. So whatever comes, and this afternoon I'm adopting a kitty.
Oh, good for you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. This, I think, is probably my very favorite podcast we've done. And
Thank you. It was so great to meet you. And Dennis, so good to see you again.
yeah,
Very well.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
Alrighty, I'm gonna share our Amazon page. Which one is it? Oh, stop. What happened? Oh, there we go. I'll have to trim that.
Oh, there's some of my books.
you there.
Yeah. Look at the Shadows is about the mistress and wife of Carl Jung and their relationship. And recently I just got contacted by a woman in London, a filmmaker who wants to make a film of it. And I gave her my blessing. I said, okay, great, the screenplay. And my favorites down at the bottom is Timeless Night, which is a play about Edith Stein, Viktor Frankl, who were both in Auschwitz together. And Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He's an incredible psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust and went on to create a whole school of psychiatry based on how you can survive in a place like Auschwitz by saying, my soul is my own. The Nazis can take everything from me, but not my soul. And Edith Stein was an incredibly brilliant philosopher who had a conversion and became a Carmelite nun.
Oh, my.
And she wrote an open letter criticizing the Pope for his collusion in deporting Jews from Italy. And for that, the Gestapo came and took her from the convent and put her in Auschwitz. So this play is an imagined night when the two of them were thrown into this old shed together for various misbehaviors and met each other and talked and knew each other and fell in love toward the end. So anyway, thank you for showing those books.
You've been busy.
I got my little children's book and
Yeah.
wonder.
Thank you both. This was just delightful.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, let's finish now. Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been awesome. This is a topic that we really wanted to dive deep into, and it's really hard to find a thought. I'm so grateful that you took the time to be with us. I really hope all journeys are positive, filled with joy. I'm so excited that your life just sounds full of abundance. And I appreciate that, all the help that you gave me in the past. So we're going to say goodbye. See you next time.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you so much, Judy. So that
It's a pleasure to meet you.
And thanks for watching or listening to Getting Your Edge, How to Right Size Your Home and Life podcast, with many episodes audio on our YouTube channel, Getting Your Edge. We would love to hear from you. Comment, like, subscribe, all those things. Plus, if you really want help with your housing situation, we always communicate, help people for free. Okay.
Well,
The
we-
consultations are free. So we'd love to hear from at edgegroupteam.com. Just drop us a line. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.